What's up? So this is going to be our final exercise in terms of using a very restricted section of the value scale. So today we're going to work from values 0 to 3. Now, I had a bunch of ideas of what I wanted to do when I started to think about the just dark kind of nature of the image I wanted to paint. And I think the last painting I did, the one of my son kind of, embedded in the closet, was very, very moody. I actually was willing to sacrifice a ton of the description of form with the reduction of the values. So I knew that I had already kind of pushed mood with the last painting, and I thought for this one, even though the value range, the darker value range, the darkest value range was actually a very attractive option to do a very, very kind of moody, heavy atmospheric painting. I thought, I could, I'm going to try to do something a little bit different, and I figured I could do a painting that had more of a design quality to it. I wanted to kind of enjoy the overlapping of shapes. So I put kind of this little scene together, which is my mom in a very kind of Whistler Hopper-esque setting, looking out a window. And I kind of put these chairs together, and I thought the interlocking of these shapes was going to kind of look really, really cool. And my intent was to have the black, my value 0, my ivory black, be the element that would connect all these shapes. So black has that just insanely beautiful quality that it can just swallow up a bunch of very ornate shapes and just synthesize them into simpler shapes, but just keep all the information almost like contained within that darkness, because silhouettes do that. When you're able to describe with a silhouette a very kind of intricate shape, you almost imagine, your mind kind of races and imagines all the information that it doesn't see. So I was hoping that I could have all these dark shapes kind of on top of each other in terms of the visual plane of the image, and that I, instead of using ivory black as a color that would emphasize atmosphere, which is it's in its nature to do that, I would just have it to sort of empower this design and to lock all these shapes and to help the viewer's eye travel through the image. And I didn't want to do something overly complex, because these are very quick paintings, and they're just exercises meant to explore the possibilities that we have when we're trying to solve a specific problem. Now, I mean, even the image that I just described could be solved in so many different ways. I mean, even the exact shapes that I designed, the composition that I'm working out, you could solve it in so many different ways. But I wanted to try this one specific way of doing it. Now, I think I ran into some trouble, and I'm being, this is the part where I'm being kind of self-critical, and I think we all have to be when we paint our images. I think I was caught up in like a bit of a limbo, and I'll try to explain why. When I started doing the underpainting for this image, I realized like, wow, this is exciting. Like having all these shapes described by this black almost gave me the sense that I was doing like a pen and ink drawing or a wash kind of drawing, and that was becoming, I don't know if I would call it a trap, but it was certainly a distraction. You know, while I was painting this, and I was really enjoying doing this little underpainting, my mind was going somewhere else. I was, you know, almost in a sense kind of forgetting why this particular image was going to work as an exercise for the restrained value scale that I was going to use. And in many ways, that is completely normal. I mean, things like these, like this, like a trap of this sort, happens constantly when we paint, where we have an original intent, and then we start painting, and we realize, wow, this image is actually pulling me somewhere else. And many times it may show us possibilities that we hadn't envisioned, and other times it's just a distraction. It's just, like I said, it's just like a trap. And it may have very nice superficial qualities, but it's actually taking you farther from what you had originally planned. And we have to be super strong at that moment. And I think what was happening is that while I was doing it, while I was painting this, I was thinking of like Robert Fawcett or Al Parker, or like, these amazing illustrators from the 60s that, designed very, very almost like complex images, but based on like a super, super high quality drawing. These were like incredible draftsmen. And while I was doing this, my mind was just being reminded of all these images, and I was saying, wow, this is so cool. Like not that my little, sketch could evoke, the work of these amazing illustrators, but in my mind, I was remembering those things. And I think that while that's pretty cool, it was actually taking me kind of farther from what I needed to do. And if we could like insert another illustrator, I actually needed to do something more that was akin to like Cornwell. Dean Cornwell would do, these grisaille paintings that were incredible, and he exercised like an incredible amount of control when painting them. He used value as a storytelling medium. It wasn't just about representing form as he saw it, but it was more of how he could emphasize the value in the form, so he could actually narrate a story, within the painting. And like I said, I really think that, regardless of how much you've painted, these sort of things happen. So I was very grateful that as soon as I started to put like opaque paint, which has a very different nature from like the transparent, underpainting that I was doing, I immediately realized that the painting had to like change course, and that I had to remind myself that I was doing a very specific exercise that needed me to concentrate on the qualities that a painting based on value, on a very restrained value scale, would give me. So I think that what ends up happening, and I'm kind of jumping here a little bit to the end of the painting, to the finished painting. I think what ended up happening is that my mind was almost caught between wanting to do a painting that would have these kind of nice shapes and nice design elements, but also realizing that it was very attractive to do somewhat restrained, atmospheric painting, kind of like a very eerie painting. Because when I set this up, I thought, well, this can be like, and I guess the best way to describe it is like a Hopper. Hopper didn't just do like interiors. There was something off. There was something almost in every single one of his paintings, and that's why he's such an incredible genius. There was something off. It's like there's a painting where he opens the door, and there's no steps. There's nothing but just really tall grass. Right as soon as he opens the door, and it. When at first glance, when you first look at the painting, you're like, okay, that's kind of fine. But when you look further into the painting, you're like, wait, what? This is weird. This is really weird. That there's no like transition between opening the door and then this field. It was very sudden, very abrupt. So I thought I could, my intent was I can actually try and get to paint this little painting that suggests that my mother is actually looking outside for something, but there's nothing there. There's this grayness there. There's this kind of thick, very soupy grayness, very blocky grayness out there. There's no, it doesn't suggest hope. It doesn't suggest anything. It's just kind of dead. This kind of there's a sort of muted, very monotonous tone to it. And I thought that was very, very cool. But again, in the execution, I got caught in actually feeling very enamored by just these shapes, these chairs. And, I forgot that all these shapes have to be there to tell a story. They have to be there, but they have to work for something else, for something bigger. And it was very, again, doing these little things, it's a very humbling act because you realize how complex painting can be. And, I'm working with four values, four very, very close values. And even there, tons of things can go wrong and tons of traps can be encountered. So again, just to emphasize, it was very cool for me to see that I had to remind myself at every step of the painting that I was doing this for a reason. And I was happy with how it turned out, but again, I feel it's trying to do too many things, the painting, and I certainly like it, and I certainly like qualities of it, and especially like the gesture of that head, just the empty look of that head. But I feel that I fell into that trap a little bit of being attracted by the parts instead of the whole. And I think that that's awesome that happened because it's a reminder of how, just how intelligent I have to be at every stage of the painting and how focused I have to remain while I'm painting it. So I was very happy. When I was doing this, I was actually reminded, and I'm going to show other people's paintings, like, the great illustrators. I was reminded of this Remington, actually, and how, what it's trying to do with the with my chairs in a very simple manner was evocative of this kind of trail that he designed with these horses going up a mountain. And just the control of the value in this particular Remington is just masterful. High contrast, in that in the foreground, And as soon as you go back, you restrain your values, horses have amazing shapes. So this is what I was reminded when I was painting. But I should have been reminded of something like this. This is a Victor Man, and this is a beautiful painting of Victor Man. It's just heavy. Everything is heavy about it. The context is heavy. The mood is heavy. The poses are kind of blocky. The action is heavy. I think this is a perfect paint. It's a painting that could have only been painted within these values, and I think he demonstrates it just perfectly. So I should have been working within here. Now my painting doesn't have to be this dark. Again, the fact that you're working within darker colors doesn't mean that the overall sense of your painting has to be heavy and dark. Victor Mann has painted other paintings like this one, which is working within those dark values, but has a much more eerie quality to it. And I think that's what what I learned after that. This is a Phil Hale actually, which achieves the same thing. He has these long cast shadows that connect everything, make everything really abstract. You can't tell where form begins and where a shadow is cast. You can't really have a sense of space. You can't understand where one form, where one individual form is, and where the collective, grouping of form lays. So I think Phil Hale does that incredibly well. Now, what I started to realize is that when you restrain your values, as soon as you start introducing like just the tiniest bit of a broader value range, your painting can activate in like really, really exciting ways. So this is another Remington that I think does that really, really well. So the shot of the gun is actually a great sort of focal point of this painting, and you can see that big mass of shadow that doesn't really describe where the brush finishes and where the horses and the background begin. So I think that's incredible control. This is another Remington where he broadens that value range a little bit more. So the shadow quality still remains. The quality of that black to like connect shapes and to describe shapes and to have everything sort of blend together and yet still describe it beautifully. And here he expands it even more with the snow, but again, the quality of those darks remains. You can't really tell where one horse begins and the other one ends. So it lends itself to just imprint very, very abstract qualities to an image. This is a Harvey Dunn, and I actually love paintings that work in this way. That instead of having your kind of focal point described, what you're having is a relationship between the foreground and the background, where the foreground actually is, a silhouette. So you rely on shapes to tell a story, and you have to exercise a ton of control. Now this is very dark shapes, but in this Cornwell, he has to put a little bit of ambient light so that there's a little bit of light filling those shapes. So again, he has that lighter background, but then in the foreground, middle ground and foreground, he has to control the little bit of light that's coming in so that he can describe a little bit better those shapes. And this is an amazing Cornwell painting. Now what happens if that little bit of light, of ambient light, becomes a little stronger, and you have, this is Frank Bromley, and this is like a color sketch for a bigger painting that's absolutely wonderful. But you have that focal point, which is the window in the background, but then you have a little more light kind of flooding in the foreground. But you have to exercise so much control so that that candle and that window become kind of symbolic in your painting. They become the light of your painting. But again, what happens if you restrict those values? You may have darks, you may have really nice, rich darks, and in this Harvey Dunn painting, the sky is not like that window or that lamp post that was in the Cornwell painting. The sky is actually very, very controlled. So this is actually like a mid-tone painting with like higher contrast because you introduce like darker values. And of course, this is Howard Pyle, he's absolutely incredible. And he's doing the same thing as that Harvey Dunn, except he's really punching up that light background. So everything in the foreground, even like the shirt and the pants of the two dead guys that are in the foreground that are light, they're not going to compete with that light background. So exercise control. And this is of course Sargent, he's an absolute genius. This is one of his like Venetian interior paintings. And it's gorgeous. I mean, you have in the background, you have that doorway with that light. You even have that little bit of light coming through and hitting her knee right in the back over there. Then it's like darkness. And eventually you come to the foreground where there's a little bit ambient light kind of filling in. So he does the whole range of values, beautifully controlled. But what happens, again, if we go back, if we just work within a very restricted value range, right in the middle of the value scale. And this is a von Kaufmann painting, Ruprecht von Kaufmann. And he just enjoys so much controlling values, so much. I mean, his paintings are just a perfect example of what to do with values and how to tell a story with value. I would strongly suggest that you look him up if you don't know who he is, but he's just, he's a genius at it. I don't think there's anyone doing it better nowadays. So this is very, very restricted again. That light little boat is not light at all, and this simpler painting is just so perfectly moody because he executes it in a super tight value scale. So if you want to see what he does with value, please check his work out. This is one of the classics, just one of the best. Also, Giacometti, who just by searching and adding so much, he creates this kind of gray mist, and he then emphasizes his drawing, but again, it's in a very, very tight place. Now what happens, and this is another von Kaufmann, where you start with contrast, but you slowly build up towards the lighter side of the value scale, and how that affects the painting. Again, von Kaufmann does this just amazingly well, and just his control over values is just masterful, and the way he uses it to narrate a story is just incredible. So this is just a focal part of one painting. And then here's another detail, and it may seem like there's contrast in this painting, but there's not real, there's no real contrast here. The darkest dark, I don't think it's even close to being a value 5 or 6. This is an insanely light paintings, just control. Again, an incredible amount of control. But what happens if you go even further and you say, well, light has to envelop my painting? And this is just one of my favorite painters ever. This is Dickenson, and he's just, the lighter values are just swallowing everything up. I wanted to show these paintings because it's really awesome to see how value can empower a painting's narrative, a painting's intent. It can really sort of push the idea. And while I'm not particularly sure if my exercise really kind of drilled it home, I think that it was very important to me to realize that it perhaps didn't do so because I started kind of, I wanted to have this small painting do two very different things at the same time. So I wanted it to feel kind of moody and just like I said, I wanted to have like an atmosphere, but something like heavy atmosphere, not kind of airy, but just kind of heavy, blocky, and there was a sense of hopelessness just in her wanting to find something outside this window. But I was also just very attracted to like shapes of chairs, and I think that's where I got kind of torn, and I let myself kind of go towards one side and then just slowly glide towards the other. And I was trying then to have, to balance everything out. But I don't think, it works well when we do that. So again, it was very humbling, and it's a reminder that when we want very, very powerful paintings that can convey like this single sort of message, and can convey it powerfully, and can convey it strongly, and can convey it quickly, we have to be on our toes, and we have to know that we have to make sacrifices in order to communicate thoroughly what we want to say with paint. If we don't, every kind of like tiny step we go farther from what would make the painting stronger is detracting from that energy that the painting can convey to the viewer. So again, I'm very glad that these things happen, and that's why I wanted to show other people's paintings, like people that are far more talented than I am as a painter, and that we can we don't have to replicate what they did, but they serve as a reminder of what they were trying to do, and how they decided to solve the painting, and why those paintings are successful. So in my case, it just made me reflect, wow, you got caught up in over designing this tiny little sketch, and I think that, like, as a sketch, I'm not saying it's a totally ineffective painting, but I do realize that when I was doing that underpainting, I just got distracted, and I feel that that's a great lesson. These are meant to be lessons of why values are so important, and that's something that I hopefully want to convey to you guys. But in many ways, honestly, these are also lessons for me to remind myself of how difficult painting can be, and how focused you need to remain, even if it's like the tiniest sketch, the quickest little annotation you do on your sketchbook, how just intently focused you have to be, and that you can't take your eye off of this very simple objective that you've set for yourself. So hopefully you guys can learn something from what I was trying to do. And the great thing in all of this is that I'm also constantly learning from what I'm trying to do. So again, this was a ton of fun. I actually want to do one more painting in black and white, a grisaille, where I want to actually have fun with using the broader value scale. So I want to use values 0 through 10 and actually try to balance like all of the possibilities that we've that we've explored in doing the last 3 paintings. I want to see if I can kind of do one painting where, you know, all of those are actually illustrated, and that's going to be a lot of fun. So that's going to be our next video, and I hope you guys liked this one. This was this one was was quite a good kind of jolt for me, just to remind myself, wow, this is, you know, this is hard. This is always going to be hard. This is always going to be tough. So if you like this, if you want to see my my good paintings and my struggles and me kind of trying to figure out where I went wrong and to recognize when I do something that's cool, and to always remain kind of critical so that I'm always learning, always growing. There's no shame in that. There's never, ever shame in that. Please, you know, like and subscribe. And I'll see you guys in my next video. Thank you.